Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we're reading the book Love Lifted Me by Jamaican author Patricia Cole. The book is a testimony to the fact that spiritual warfare is real and is no respecter of persons, gender, ethnicity, or color, but that Jesus can lift you from the very depths of despair, superstition, and affliction through his wonderful word, the sacred scriptures, the Bible. In our last reading, we covered the author's dedication to her mother and chapter 1, entitled Childlike Faith, Childish Fear, where we learned of the Christian strength and faith of her Seventh-day Adventist mother, who stuck to her faith and principles, even though the rest of her family and community were not of the same religion. We also learned of Sister Patricia's youth and family history, realizing that she came from a line of Waldensians, her great-grandfather having migrated from Scotland to Jamaica in 1820, purchasing 36 acres of land and using it to promote education and religion in that area of Trelawney Parish by building a school and a church and giving Waldensian names to many locations there. Internationally famous Olympian and known as the world's fastest man, Usain Bolt, started his early education in the school in the Waldensia district. We also learned of Sister Patricia's early years and her love for church and reading the Bible, coupled with a fear of ghosts and spirits, which was instilled in her by stories she heard from adults in the community of how the dead would come back to haunt those who had troubled them in life. This fear became a preoccupation of the author, despite her belief in God. She started to attend a church other than the Baptist church, where congregants believed that you would receive the gift of the Holy Spirit if you spoke in unknown tongues, and that those who did so would be able to rebuke the evil spirits and ghosts who haunted the community. However, as hard as she tried, she was not able to speak in unknown tongues and receive the power to rebuke spirits. Eventually, Sister Patricia left her home village of Bunker Hill to live with her older sister in the city of Montego Bay. There, the country girl soon became a city gal, forgetting her church activities and joining the party crowd and going to the disco, dances, and social events, and becoming known even in the local newspapers as being among the best-dressed people in the city. She got a job as an administrative secretary and soon gave birth to her first daughter, whom she left with her mother to raise, not realizing what a blessing that would be for the child and for herself in her later years, when she needed the love and support of a Christian daughter and mother. You may purchase this book at Amazon.com and read along with us as we continue the story today with chapter 2, entitled From Spiritism to Christianity. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. I migrated to the United States in the late 1970s and continued working in the banking industry. For some strange reason, my customers would constantly ask me about witch doctors in Jamaica. I could never give them the answers they were seeking, but after so many inquiries, I became curious and started to inquire about it myself. I learned a little and would buy certain candles and incense to use in my home. I also became curious about the occult and started watching horror movies, like some by Alfred Hitchcock, and other films such as The Exorcist, Amityville Horror, and Omen 2 Damien. Of course, at the time, I did not know that these films were occultic. I thought they were true stories. Around this same time, my co-worker's brother died tragically in a car accident. The family was grieving and wanted closure, so they planned a seance session. They were going to contact him for information about his death. They explained what would happen in the session to me in full, but somehow I didn't have the interest to go, and thankfully I didn't. Nonetheless, while walking the streets or in the malls with my co-worker friend, we would have palm readers invite us to have our futures predicted. We would often accept their invitations. They would read our palms and tell us our future on spot, and we would pay them a fee. Prior to moving to the United States, I had also lived in Canada. At that time, I would vacation in the US and other countries. In my quest to know more about what happened when a person died, I had purchased many books and read papers about the subject while visiting the US. On other trips, I stayed with a family who were members of the Masonic Lodge and attended functions at their temple with them. The family regularly engaged in a ritual at home that involved every family member. Incense would be lit, and then we would walk silently throughout every room in the house. I have a happy disposition and tended to break into laughter during these rituals because they appeared quite comical to me. At the time, I did not realize the seriousness of the exercise, nor that what I was participating in was not Christian. In addition, I adopted some of the American and other traditions, such as Halloween. I would observe the Halloween tradition while in the United States. Even at points where I did not decorate myself, my co-worker friend and I would visit neighborhoods to view the displays. I would also purchase the figures and carvings from different cultures, not knowing that some of this artwork was of deities and gods. Of course, these artifacts became part of my home decor and mementos of my many travels. I got married in the early 1980s and traveled back and forth between the United States and Jamaica in order to assist my husband with his business affairs. During this time, I resumed my custom of attending church with my daughter, but only on special occasions. I also continued my practice of reading the daily horoscope. During the first year of my marriage, I became pregnant with my second child and suffered morning sickness and chronic bleeding the entire pregnancy. Per doctor's orders, I was on bed rest until I gave birth to my second daughter. Unfortunately, I had way too much free time on my hands during the bed rest period, and so read all sorts of books. I was able to get all my favorite horror films thanks to a satellite connection that beamed in television channels from around the world to our home. While I was laid up at home, my mother would visit with me and would encourage me to read healthy books and to get out and enjoy nature, rather than feeding my mind with so much evil. Of course, I ignored her well-meaning wisdom, and a series of events would later take place that would lead me to question everything I believed and cause me to wish I knew more about the Bible. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of the times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 through 13. The end of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Fears and questions about death. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 5. My grandmother Adora was well loved by all. She was from Cuba, where my mother was born also. She was a Christian who faithfully attended the Baptist church and was known to be a very generous and kind-hearted woman. After I moved away, I would visit her and bring groceries as often as I could. I fondly remember always being given her trademark blessing of, "May God bless you," when leaving. I had no idea one could pray for others who were not sick, but those words would come to mean a lot to me, especially throughout my travels. I loved my grandmother Adora, Granny. She was a pillar of faith and love in my life. Granny's sudden death came as a shock and left a huge vacuum in my life. She wasn't ill, and I had only seen her a week prior. I was not only saddened by the news, but also fearful. Childhood beliefs about death and ghosts began to creep up once again. Despite my fears, I set about arranging a funeral service, which I felt would honor my grandmother's memory, both what she meant to us and what she meant to the community. I did everything to ensure that all was perfect. At the funeral, I was heartbroken. They opened the lid of the coffin so I could see her one final time. I fainted when I saw her. The memory of her face would haunt me for some time to come. Everyone had good to say about her, but her memory haunted me in my sleep. I had many dreams about her that fed my fears. Once I dreamt that she was very angry with me, and it bothered me immensely, as I'd never seen my grandmother upset while alive. I began to see apparitions of her as my sleep became scarce. I had suffered 3 major losses in a short time: a close cousin, my grandfather, and Granny. And I was experiencing nightmares. To compound that, I also lost my 3rd child about a year after Granny's death and had become very ill. My visions of her intensified as I would see her coming to feed me or tending to my flower garden as I grieved the death of my baby. I became very fearful and shared this with my friends. They told me she was haunting me, and that the only way to get rid of her was to go to a faith healer to get protection. I was referred to a faith healer, the best, and went to get my protection. As I sat down in her so-called office, she began to write some strange language and then interpreted my life to me. She then gave me a list and instructed me where to shop for the oils and powders and other items on the list. I brought the items back to her, and she mixed them together. She then gave me a ring to wear, containing some of the powdered concoction, as well as some of the mixture to sprinkle around the house, and a small portion to carry in my purse. What was curious to me is that this woman also used the Bible in her art, and so advised me to read the 23rd Psalm and to leave my Bible open on my nightstand or on the bed for protection. I faithfully followed all the instructions I was given, but there was no change, dramatic or otherwise, in my circumstances. So I kept searching for a resolution to my problem. I also heard about the Catholic Church, that they wore crucifixes, which are necklaces with Jesus on the cross. So I got a crucifix, and I kept it with me. I also hung wooden crosses in strategic places in my house as instructed, and invited a priest to come over and pray in my home. My confused beliefs about the state of the dead were leading me down a road that only God could redirect me from. One night in a dream, I saw my grandfather and grandmother happy in the sky. They told me they were both in heaven, and they were very happy. Instead of being relieved, however, my fears became magnified 1,000 times over. My incessant mourning and emotional strain were beginning to manifest physically in the form of heart palpitations. I went to the doctors, who did an EKG exam and determined that I was stressed. The EKG showed no abnormalities as such. I was prescribed medications to help calm my anxieties. All this time, I had to try my best to maintain a sense of normalcy for my husband's and children's sake. I was very careful not to allow them to see what I was doing, and so did all the activities I was instructed to do while they were at school or in bed. Soon after, my eldest daughter left home for boarding school, and God orchestrated it that she ended up living in the home of a Christian family. This family was actively involved in prayer ministry and traveled from place to place to pray with and for others. Even in her childlike wisdom, my daughter observed that all was not well with me. She told me she was very concerned about my health and what was happening to me. She was a preteen at the time. She also said she would ask the lady she was boarding with to pray for me. I, in turn, told her, "Go ahead, I really don't care." But through this experience, my daughter was learning to pray. And though not at home, she was praying for me. Later, my daughter relocated to the United States for college. I will never forget the day she called to tell me about her intentions to get baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I cannot fully explain my response to her, except it must not have been me. I told my child I wanted nothing to do with her, that she should not come home ever again, and that I would not pay any more money for her to complete her schooling. I was so angry, I abruptly ended the telephone conversation and reached out to a few of my friends who were fellow Sunday worshipers with whom we had a relationship, hoping that they would in turn call her to plead with her not to go through with this baptism. In retrospect, I really did not know why I acted in that manner, as I knew nothing about SDA beliefs. Nonetheless, I told her that I would not support her if she gave up her part-time job in order to go to church on a Saturday. With some prodding, my daughter relented, deciding she would not get baptized since I didn't approve of it. I, in turn, decided I needed to go to the church personally to handle this. I wanted to see and know the individuals who had brainwashed my child. I flew to the U.S. and accompanied her on the Sabbath she had initially scheduled as the day of her baptism. During the service, the pastor made an appeal for additional persons who wanted to be baptized to do so. My daughter got up, turned to me, and said, "Bye, Mom. I'm going to be baptized." Something came over me, and instead of being angry with her, I hugged her tightly and wept. Somehow, watching her get baptized had brought back joyful memories of my own baptism in the Baptist church as a child. This feeling of elation would be short-lived, however. Almost immediately after, I reverted to my deep-seated fears about this church that she was joining. The end of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. My search for peace, health, and happiness. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prosper. 3 John, verse 2. On my return to Jamaica, my family life started unraveling. Arguments were becoming more frequent with my husband. Everything was spinning out of control. I was also beginning to feel even more physically ill. I went to see a medical doctor who again determined that I was stressed and prescribed psychotropic medications such as Xanax. I was referred to another specialist who later prescribed Valium. However, nothing was helping. As my physical condition worsened, the doctor's visits increased, and I saw several local specialists. But while I was seeking medical attention for what I thought was a physical condition, my friends were insisting it was a spiritual issue. Nonetheless, I continued to shuffle back and forth between doctors, desperate for healing and relief. Everyone I encountered had a different and better faith healer, herbal doctor, or medical doctor to recommend. My fears and my curiosity grew in proportion to my problems. I suffered with migraine headaches, insomnia, heart palpitations, and anxiety attacks. I had a multitude of reproductive problems, allergies, and was severely anemic. I was taking medications for just about all the ailments I had. There was no peace for me. I was always on the defensive. I was desperate for healing and went to whoever could provide help. But despite being deathly ill, I continued with my entertaining and parties. By all appearances, I was having a great time. No one knew the intense pain that was waiting for me in the shadows when the parties ended and I was alone. I felt safe when people like me were around. I was very fashion conscious and made myself happy with the best money could buy, whether with designer bags, matching shoes, or the finest jewelry. I also loved to entertain and had what I thought was the best to eat: lobster, shrimp, crab, jerk pork, the best cuts of meat. I drove miles to get the best shrimp, good piglet, young pig to roast, and the biggest, juiciest cuts of ham. Despite being on medication, I drank champagne and beer. The addictions to and cravings for foods with hot pepper and spices took hold of me. The more I got, the more I wanted. It was after returning from my eldest daughter's baptism in the U.S. that I became pregnant with my third child. I was unfortunate with this baby in that, unlike my other pregnancies, I did not need to be on complete bed rest for this child. This time, I could move about a little, even though I was suffering quite a bit. However, I continued to watch horror films, despite the nightmares I had after watching them, and I continued to read books about death. I engaged in any activity that would give me even a glimpse into my future. I could not seem to break the morbid fascination that I had with death, because I wanted to know what happens after we cease to breathe and exist on the earth. Things took a turn for the worse when at 8 months pregnant, I tripped on a carpet at home, went into premature labor, and lost the baby. I was so distraught, I did not even think to ask for her body so I could funeralize her properly. I returned home from the hospital in indescribable emotional pain. Everywhere I turned, I saw my baby, or what I thought was my baby's ghost. She would be in the bathtub. Sometimes at night, when I was lying down, she would lay on my tummy, crying, "Mommy." I would hear her bouncing a ball out in the hallway and calling, "Mommy, Mommy." When I opened my bedroom door, I would see her running down the stairs. My grandmother, Aldora, would appear to me at nights as an apparition, bringing medicine in the form of leaves from the garden and food to feed me. I was not eating at this time and was so very sick. The dreams felt so real because this was very typical of how she was when she was alive, very caring. There were times that I would see her coming, and I'd be so excited to see her, I would call out to her as she approached. But then, she would disappear. It was during this time that I purchased a large family Bible. I thought the bigger the Bible, the better it would be at offering me protection. I brought the Bible to my room and opened it on my bedside table. One night, while I was laying in bed sick, I saw an apparition in the form of a man dressed in black, standing in a corner of my room. The man reached over the Bible lying next to me and hit me squarely on the head. In my mind, the Bible had offered no protection from this ghost. Unsolicited advice came from all directions on how to protect myself from the spirit of the baby. I became so sick that I was afraid to sleep, to be alone, or even to shower by myself. I was hurting and confused. It seemed I was more concerned about my dead relatives' well-being than my own. I continued on a downward spiral as I grieved the loss of my baby and other loved ones. I lost my sense of direction, both physically and emotionally. I would drive around in circles trying to find my children's school and other places that were once quite familiar to me. I remember a particular instance where I was going to visit a friend who lived about 2 blocks away, and I could not find her house. I unknowingly walked past her gate and was going around in circles until she saw me from her window and called me in. My problems seemed to worsen, and I blamed everyone and everything. I visited Dr. Mobay, a pseudonym, in Montego Bay, and told him all my problems. He was a medical doctor as well as a naturopath who practiced hypnosis and prescribed yoga as part of his treatment plan. He was also a member of the local Masonic Lodge. He put me on a regimen of vitamins, gave me a diet chart, and invited me to join the yoga class that he taught. He also encouraged me to get massage therapy. So I went to the massage therapist that he recommended. After my first massage session, the therapist told me that that night I would have a dream and I was to report it to her at my next appointment. That night, I dreamt of a large building. The architecture was similar to the ones we see in science fiction movies, something from outer space. As I entered the building, I went toward the elevator, and I saw Dr. Mobe exiting the elevator. But as I was about to enter the elevator, I heard a voice say, "You do not belong here." After that dream, I never went back to the massage therapist. I did not realize it then, but God was speaking to me. He was protecting me, even in my sleep. Despite all this, I still felt safe with Dr. Mobe. After all, he was a medical doctor. In his yoga class, I learned various poses and relaxation techniques, including chanting and humming for meditation. He used hypnosis to help relieve my pains and anxiety attacks and prescribe natural remedies. He would also conduct seminars on maintaining a healthy lifestyle. I was thrilled to be a part of this group because they all looked so happy. I felt secure with these connections. I felt a sense of security. But nothing brought lasting peace. Not yoga, not hypnosis. A very close cousin and friend who was a police officer had also died during the same period of time I lost my grandmother. During this time, I would have dreams of my cousin living in the river near my mother's home. And in these dreams, he was always inviting me to come and join him in the river. I saw many other deceased persons living in the river, and they seemed happy. But whenever the invitation was issued to come in, I would repeat Psalm 23 or open my Bible. Unwittingly, I began visiting the river to look for these water residents. Whenever I got to the riverside, I would see my cousin in the river with several other people, calling me to come into the water. I could not swim, so I knew I would not make it out alive. My emotional health was failing. This, compounded with my physical failing health, placed me in dire and desperate straits. Acting on the advice to protect my home and my family, I recalled my experience with the lodge which I had visited while in Canada. And so I invited a Masonic Lodge member to my home to rid the house of ghosts. I was being haunted by the emotional pain of loss, not having grieved properly the sudden death of several of my close loved ones. I had invited spiritual explanations for my pain that relied on erroneous beliefs about the state of the dead. Furthermore, I was unsuspectingly allowing evil in thinking it was good and would bring me relief. The Masonic Lodge member gave me a Bible with the lodge's symbol on it and told me that after every activity in the house, I should walk throughout while reading the 23rd Psalm. I was also to leave the Bible open in my room. I felt secure for a while, thinking that the Masonic sign on the Bible represented protection. In fact, everywhere I went afterward and saw someone wearing the lodge insignia, I identified with that person. I felt secure, because these were individuals of learning and high esteem in the community. Despite this, however, my issues persisted. Still, the avid reader that I always was, I read all kinds of books on death and the afterlife until I started to believe in reincarnation as taught by the yoga physician in Montego Bay. This spurious belief taught that my deceased relatives would come back someday as new individuals, and that I too would return in some new form after death. I studied and accepted the evolutionary theory as true, and would go to the zoo to look at the monkeys to study how they compare to us. I read Nostradamus' book of predictions on how the world would end. I read any and everything I could get my hands on that would give me the answers that I sought. Everything except the Bible. Instead of abiding in peace, I reaped greater fear. I had many terrible dreams about how the world would end. In one dream, I saw clouds like thick black smoke rolling over itself as it got closer and closer to the earth. I was afraid to look up, but as I was about to run, I glanced at the angry clouds and saw a hand as it wrote the word R-E-P-E-N-T, repent. I had no idea what that meant, but it filled me with dread. On another occasion, I dreamt that there was heavy rain all over the island. I looked up, and in the sky was the map of Jamaica, with a large hand hovering over the right side, about to break the island in two. The person the hand belonged to was very angry, and I began to plead with him not to destroy Jamaica before I got baptized. In that dream, I ran for miles over hills and rough terrain, trying to get back to my home community where I was first baptized. I ran in the rain, crying and pleading with the person not to destroy the island. When I got to the crossroads, entering Bunker's Hill near my mother's home, I saw the church on the hill. It was crowded as a church service was in progress there. I had run quite a distance, approximately 26 miles in total. I decided to stop, having previously decided that I would get baptized at the first church I got to. Out of breath, due to running such a long way, I looked in from a window and saw young men and women dressed in black and white, singing Christian songs and dancing. They were kissing each other, and some were engaged in sexual activities. A voice said to me, "Not here." So I turned and ran. After arriving at the Baptist church, exhausted and out of breath, I awoke from my sleep, and the dream ended. I later told a wise friend, Norma, about the dreams I had been having. Her response to me was sobering. She told me I ought to be happy because God was speaking to me. She went on to add that another friend of hers had had similar experiences with God, but ignored every altar call. She also walked out of the church during each appeal, and unfortunately, later died without accepting Christ. This led me to ponder about my own condition and the recent deaths of my loved ones. Here, death was once again staring me in the face. Death, 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 death again. It was in those moments that I determined not to ignore the prompting of the Holy Spirit and risk dying in my sins. So, I found myself in church every Sunday after these dreams and the admonition of my friend. I soon after got rebaptized in the Baptist church. The end of chapter 4 of Love Lifted Me by Patricia Cole.